My name is Christian Damm and I work with simulation and development here at Asetek, and I was also responsible for the running of this room. Welcome everyone to the sauna, as we call it, because we're lacking air condition up here, so it gets a bit hot when we're testing. But up here we test the pedals from a user point of view. So here we spend a lot of hours testing different things on our simulators and our benchmarking equipment. We have prototype motors and prototype pedals for development up here, where we try them for different racing cars, different scenarios. That doesn't require destructive testing like in other places here in the company, but from a user point of view and a software point of view. So I have worked in motorsport for 5 to 6 years in various different racing categories. I recently worked at the Ferrari F1 team in the ERS department, which stands for Energy Recovery System. So the hybrid system of the engine, which involved a lot of technical work and a lot of vehicle dynamics, which coincides with what we do here at Asetek with simulation equipment. So here there's a distinct link between motorsport and simulation, which I feel that there's lacking in other competitor products and around in the sim racing community. There's a lot of knowledge and a lot of technology going around with these products, but there's a significant lack with the relation to actual motorsport and sim racing. That's where I help, and our pedals are designed with real motorsport in mind. For instance, driving techniques like heel and towing, trail braking and ergonomic design of the pedals to be adjusted to your foot and not just a regular person. It can fit anyone to any driving style. So what is heel and tow? It's an advanced driving technique that used to be used in Formula 1 and Formula 2 and rally driving, still used in rally driving, touring cars in the 80s and the 90s. You may have noticed in a Formula 1 car, when it brakes nowadays, you can hear the engine spike up, making a woo sound when they go down the gears. That's the computer of the car actuating the clutch and actually pressing the throttle pedal at the same time to make sure that the wheels and the engine is at the same rotational speed to engage the gear. So with the Invicta pedals, it makes heel and towing very easy because you can adjust it to offset the brake pedal. So when you press, you can blip the throttle with your right foot and achieve a good clean blip of over 50% on the throttle. Now, in an 80s and a 90s Formula 1 car, for instance, there were no computers to do this. There were plans to do it, and Ferrari did it in the early 90s, but let's say you're in the 80s and you want to drive an old 80s Formula 1 car in your simulator. Then you have to use heel and tow. Because there's no computer doing the downshifts and the blips for you, you have to do what's called heel and towing, which is using your 2 feet to actuate all 3 pedals in the car: the clutch, the brake and the throttle. So when you're braking with your right foot, you have to use the clutch on the downshift while also using your right foot to actuate the throttle to make sure that the engine and the wheels are spinning at the same speed to engage the gear and make sure that the rear axle, it doesn't lock and then send you into a spin and into the wall. It's an advanced driving technique because it takes a lot of practice to do, and unfortunately it's not used a lot anymore. But with the Invicta pedals, you can adjust it to match perfectly with your braking point and the throttle blip on your right foot, and it's a lot of fun. What makes the Invicta pedals special to me is simply the sound. They're built to be motorsport pedals. They're built to be stamped on and to be used by simulator drivers and racers just like they are in real life. They stand aside from the competition because they're meant to be used like a set of pedals are meant to be used. You don't have to be nice to them, and they're so satisfying to use. If I could give an advice to the regular sim racer out there watching this, it would be to don't be afraid to admit that you don't know what you're adjusting. There are so many different parameters that you can adjust nowadays, and actually knowing what they do and what effect it has on the steering feel, on the pedals and the ergonomics of what you're trying to do is a good thing. Learning is a good thing, and we will help you to learn what to adjust and make it as easy as possible here at Asetek. So in terms of race car ergonomics, it's very important where you're sitting in your simulator rig, where your eyes are in relation to the screen, where the pedals are, the seat inclination of where you're sitting, the tilt of the steering wheel. So for us here, we have 600 millimeters to our eyes because that's at the point where these 49-inch curved screens have the best compromise between the field of view and at the point where it's too close to your eyes and you'll start to strain from viewing for prolonged periods of time. Here, for instance, we've designed a custom bracket for a simulator rig to have the best compromise between field of view of where your eyes are in relation to the screen without you becoming nearsighted and getting headaches. In the simulator itself, once you get down, you may see that the seating position here is reclined, it's at an angle, and that's unfortunately a compromise, so it can both drive GT but also in a formula driving position as such. In a real formula car, you'd be even more laying down and the pedals will be much higher up. But to ensure that we can test everything up here in this simulator and any car, then we have to do a compromise between a formula and a GT driving position. Your arms and your shoulders should be positioned in such a way that the steering wheel gives you around 50 degrees, 45 degrees of arc. So you can use both your shoulder muscles and your pectoral muscles and have the most control on the steering wheel. It's important that you don't sit in your simulator like you do in your road car with extended arms, because that's a relaxing position that doesn't give you a lot of control. But in a simulator, you're trying to sit like you are in a racing car because you need the control and the confidence to throw the car around and catch the oversteer. All of these things you may think may not do a difference. But because you're lacking the sense of where the grip is in the car and when you're about to slip, when you're on the limit, all of these different things have higher importance when you're racing. So these have to be absolutely perfect. Aerodynamics in a simulator is a bit difficult because you're lacking the sense of speed in the simulator. There's no motion, but the aerodynamic downforce and the drag of the car goes up with the square of the air velocity over the car. So the faster the car goes, the more drag you have by the power of 2. So it doubles every time. What this means is that the faster you go, the more grip you'll have, which is a bit difficult to explain, but imagine you have your hands here and there's a certain amount of grip. If you start just rubbing your hands together, you can feel the friction. So imagine this is the road and this is the tire. The faster you go, the more you have to press down into your hand and the more grip you will have. And the same applies to a racing car. And why that's important is because when you then start to brake and you start to lose speed, your grip will also go down. So when you brake in a simulator, you have to be on the limit of the grip, which is dependent on your speed and your load transfer to the front of the car in order to brake. So you need to brake fully if you are driving a car that has a lot of downforce, like a Formula 3 or Formula 2 or Formula 1 car. You need to stamp on the brake as hard as you can and then slowly let off as your car will lose grip because you're braking and decreasing your speed. And this technique, when you get to the apex of the corner and you're going very slow and don't have a lot of grip, it's called trail braking. And on the Invicta pedals, we've simulated the feel of the brake pads hitting the brake discs. So when you're going very slowly, you have a very high amount of feel in the brake pedal and you can adjust how much feeling you want there before you apply the full braking pressure, just like you would in a Formula 1 or a Formula 2 car. That sort of braking technique is one of the things where you can gain the most amount of times, and it's where real racing drivers set aside from, let's say, some average driver, is because they know how much grip the car has when it's decreasing in speed. In my view, the advantage of RaceHub is the ease of use with the software. I've used a lot of different simulator software and some of it is a bit difficult to use. RaceHub instead is easy to use, and you can calibrate the pedals within 3 or 5 seconds if you want. And you can match the throttle pedal, the brake pedal, and the clutch maps to any racing car that you want. Now, RaceHub is designed so it's easy to calibrate all the pedals. And as you can see here, if we take the throttle pedal, we simply click calibrate, press the throttle, click complete, and there we go. Now the throttle pedal is calibrated. We can do the same for the brake. And you can see here the measurement in bars. And 41 bars, that's what I would like for my maximum brake pressure right now. I click complete, and now we can see the brake pedal is adjusted. The same applies to the clutch. Press it, click complete, and done. On the brake pedal, you can see it says 2% here, and that's because there's a little bit of pressure in the brake itself. So to make that go away and ensure that you don't drag the brake on the straight, for instance, you can put a little dead zone in here, and you can see it functions perfectly. The same applies to the upper limits of the clutch, the brake, and the throttle. And all of this is intuitively designed, so all you have to do is press the pedal, and you can always see what it does and drag it to the point where you would like it. On the simulators in here, we've got the throttle map matched to our Audi R8 GT3 Evo, for instance, which has a set of exponential throttle maps on the throttle pedal to make sure that you have the most resolution at low speed and low throttle actuation, and a lower sense of control with the high throttle, because if you're going over 60% throttle, you most likely will want full throttle regardless. And we've mimicked that in the RaceHub software to be as easy to use as possible, so you can drive just like your favorite race driver.